It's not often you hear the words Donald Duck and controversial in the same sentence. Unless, of course, you look up any fan art online. I know what you people do, and it confuses and terrifies me. But what if I told you Disney actually made a controversial Donald Duck game? Well, here's Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow. A Donald Duck game, kinda, that was also pretty controversial for the time. Again, kinda. But I guess before we get into this, I have to give you a bit of a history lesson. Now, this game was originally created on the Mega Drive, and was originally titled Disney's Donald in Maui Mallard. The idea was Donald was going to be a sort of digital actor, playing a character known as Maui Mallard, a soft-boiled detective, sort of like Magnum P.I., but with the added bonus of having a alter ego known as Cold Shadow, some sort of crazy super duck ninja. Now, the game was all set and ready to go. It was ported and made for the Super Nintendo and ready to ship out to North America. But Disney figured that parental watchdog groups might take issue with this game. Why? Well, first off, Maui Mallard ends up fighting ghosts using a gun. So I guess Disney was kind of afraid that parental watch groups would see Donald Duck as a bad influence, teaching kids to shoot fireflies out of guns to kill ghosts, or something. It was the next Doom, is basically what I'm saying. There was going to be murder sprees, using fireflies, it was going to be the start of World War III, it was terrible. Oh, yeah, and, this. Yeah, it gets a little dark near the end. Anyway, in their infinite knowledge and laziness, Disney decided to ship the game anyway, with a grand total of 0 changes. The only thing they did differently between the Japanese version and the North American version is literally remove any and all reference to Donald Duck. So instead of it being Disney's Donald in Maui Mallard, it's Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow. They removed any references from the game, the title, as well as any advertising, which I think probably hurt its sales pretty bad because this game isn't all that well known. So, Disney's paranoia probably shot themselves in the foot pretty hard. The story of the game is a mystical island idol has been stolen, and now Maui Mallard has taken the case, and has sworn to go track it down and return it. But because of all this super paranormal stuff going on, he figures he could use some help from his good old alter ego, Cold Shadow. And basically from then on, it's just rampaging about the island, killing ghosts as both a ninja and crazy Hawaiian-shirted detective. And that, in and of itself, sounds awesome to me. The gameplay is a standard platformer. You run around the environment trying to get from point A to point B. The biggest problem with the gameplay itself is the jumping mechanics. And that's because the jumping is a little bit floaty. It feels like the momentum from your land speed and the momentum from your airspeed are just completely different and don't translate terribly well. Often you'll end up trying to overcorrect for jumps because you just overshoot them a little bit. Granted, after the first or second level, you tend to get used to it, so it's not too bad, but it will stand out the first couple minutes you play it. Beyond that, it's a fairly basic platformer, but with the exception that of the 2 characters you get, they play fairly differently. You've got Maui, who fights using a gun. He has 3 types of ammunition. He's got standard bugs. His second ammo type are lightning bugs. These fire off a sort of spread shot. These are a lot more limited than the standard bugs, but they're also a lot more effective. And the third ammo type are firebugs, which fire off a homing shot. You can also combine both the lightning and firebugs to create a sort of super homing shot, and I felt that saving your ammo for the super shots was the most effective strategy. Maui can also jump and climb vines to get around environments a lot easier. Now, his alter ego, the ninja Cold Shadow, is unlocked on level 2, and to summon his abilities you have to collect yin-yang tokens. Once you have them, you can transform at any time to access Cold Shadow's abilities, which actually vary fairly greatly from Maui Mallard's. For example, Cold Shadow doesn't have a gun, he has a bow staff, which means that attacking enemies has to be done very close range, making it kinda tricky to get in several hits at once. While in ninja form, he also can't climb ropes. However, he can climb short vertical passages with the use of his staff. He also has the ability to combo enemies with his staff, provided he has enough tokens, as the more he combos opponents, the more tokens get taken away. So it adds a sort of secondary health bar feature to the game, and you have to manage your tokens fairly well if you want to keep in ninja form. It might just be easier to swap to Detective Maui and shoot the enemy a few times rather than spending the tokens, just so you can save your special attacks for later on. The levels are varied in nature and are fairly sizable. There are 8 levels in total, each one having 3 individual stages within. And each individual stage has its own unique feel. While it might be thematically the same, it might have slightly altered gameplay, traps, or other tricks that you have to maneuver around. This means that while each stage might appear the same, it'll feel completely differently. My one biggest problem with the stage layouts, though, is that some of them just feel a little bit too confusing to navigate at times. And I think part of that is because the backgrounds are just so crammed with detail, but another part of that is the levels are designed usually with a sort of multi-tiered winding aspect to them. So while they are for the most part completely linear, they are at the same time a little bit confusing to navigate at times. Now, my third biggest problem with this game at this point is the ability to save your progress. This game does not have a save slot, and with like 24 stages in total, you don't really need one, but this game does provide you with a password function. Now, while that's all well and good, the biggest problem is getting that password. In a standard game, you generally get a password by reaching a certain point in the game. This game does it a little bit differently. At the beginning of each level, you are given a loot goal to reach. Pick up X amount of treasure, and when you finish the level, you will be taken to a bonus round. Now that's all well and good, but you have to complete the bonus round, and if you do, you get a password. However, if you fail, you don't get a password. I think that's a little bit much just to get the ability to resume where you were previously. Oh, and the boss of level 2. For some reason, they decided to throw a gauntlet match at you, and that has a weird spike in difficulty. Maybe I was doing it wrong, but that was another thing about the levels that just didn't seem quite right. But besides all that, the gameplay itself is a ton of fun. Absolutely, it's just pure platforming bliss. This game is bright, colorful, and just full of personality. All the characters have tons of expressions, and in fact this is used to great effect with the storytelling in the game. In between levels you'll be given a little bit of a story update, which is shown completely in silhouette, which means it relies heavily on the character's expressiveness. And I gotta say, this game certainly handles expression very well. All the idle animations of Maui and Cold Shadow are very nice, very nice. You've got Maui twirling his gun, you've got Cold Shadow doing this, which, if someone could teach me how to do that with a bow staff, I am so in on that. That looks awesome. But yeah, all the enemies are full of personality. From the basic ghosts and bugs, to the annoying little tribal ducks, to the spirits of the undead, it just works very well. All the environments are varied, colorful, and full of detail. I love the backgrounds in this game, they're just tremendous. The sound design for this game is tremendous. The soundtrack itself has almost a sort of Super Mario World quality to it. And what I mean by that is, with Super Mario World you had a single melody that was reworked and nuanced slightly differently in every level. Because of this, every song felt different, but because they all used the singular melody, it tied it all together to create one single unified world, which you can tell audibly. And to pull something like that off effectively takes a lot of talent, and I think it hits well here in this game as well. The sound effects all work fairly well. I am quite fond of the sound that Maui makes when he takes damage. It just sounds like Donald Duck getting flustered, and it works well with the idea that Donald Duck is playing a character. Unless you're playing the North American version. Then it has nothing to do with that duck that Disney has never heard of ever. Wink. But in the end, both visibly and audibly, the presentation is tremendous. And to summarize, that's basically Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow, the Donald Duck game that isn't, kinda, but totally is, and if someone tells you it isn't, they're wrong. And I really wish this game got a lot more recognition, because, in all honesty, I have played a grand total of 6 Disney games in my life. And for the hell of it, let me just list them all. We have Mickey's Mousecapade on the NES, Toy Story on the SNES, Goof Troop on the SNES, Tarzan on the N64, and Mickey's Magical Mirror on the GameCube. And of course, we can't forget Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow. And by far, I think this was the best Disney game I've ever played. Granted, I haven't played them all. I'm sure I've only played a small fraction of them. But you know what? This is the only Disney game that has Donald Duck being a complete and total badass. And that's not something you see all that often.